the Palestinians, but we also in Saudi Arabia, I think in other Arab countries, will have to take into consideration that a Biden administration is emanating from an Obama administration, but not necessarily bound by Obama's implementation of his foreign policy, particularly on issues like the JCPOA and other issues in the area. Biden has said that he will go back to the JCPOA, but that he will have conditions for going back. We still don't know what those conditions are, but he talked about Iranian missile production and also Iranian malign activity in the area. How that is going to square with his wish to go back to the JCPOA, we still have to wait and see, should he become president. Have views on the area and have acted on the area. So they're known for them. My concern actually about some Arab quarters, particularly my Palestinian friends and brothers, is if they expect that President Biden is going to be different from Mr. Trump, I think they will be sorely disappointed in that. Because I think Mr. Biden as president is not going to draw back from where Mr. Trump has driven America, whether it is on Jerusalem, on the Golan Heights, or on the so-called Abrahamic Accords. So that is something that they would have to take into their calculations should Mr. Biden become president. And so it is something I think that not only, of course, Arab Peace Initiative, which was initially presented by the late King Abdullah to the Arab Summit in 2002. And so on that issue, I don't think there should be any questions as to where I or other personal views may have come out either from Prince Bandar or from other spokespeople in the kingdom. And I remember correctly that our foreign minister, when he was asked about Prince Bandar's views on that issue, he said that these were Prince Bandar's views, but that the official position of the kingdom was still the Arab Peace Initiative is the only viable solution to the problem between Israel and the Arab states. So that is where that issue stands at the moment. One thing I think, as General Petraeus said, both Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump.
Stay with the thing that you wanted Prince Turkey to answer about the Abraham Accords and whether Saudi Arabia is going to be one of the next countries that would go with it, and whether this will be a priority of President Biden as it has been for President Trump. Prince Turkey, what do you want to tell us?
And perhaps if Prince Turkey could just comment a bit, perhaps on Prince Bandar's interview, Your Highness.
Well, let me start by saying that I speak for myself. I don't speak for the government. And so what comes out of me, you can take it with whatever it's worth. First of all, on the so-called Abrahamic Accords, the kingdom has made its position very clear on that at the highest level, and that is that the kingdom is committed to the two-state solution as envisioned by the...
is, as one would expect, spot on. Iran is still trying to achieve hegemony over the Shia crescent that stretches from Iran through Iraq, through Syria, and down into southern Lebanon. Iraq does have a very impressive prime minister, as Prince Turkey noted. He has impressive goals. He has a superb cabinet, a surprisingly good cabinet, frankly, and he was able to get his two security ministers confirmed in the first tranche rather than usually in the very late tranche. But it is an open question whether or not the objectives when it comes to the effectiveness and performance of government, the provision of basic services, that the land of the two rivers should not be able to provide fresh water for its people is more than baffling, and that it can't provide 24-hour power when it's one of the top 5 countries with proven oil reserves, also equally puzzling.
Let me just open it up for a discussion now. And that's
diplomatic, technological, tourism, trade, and all the rest of that. And I think that is a very significant achievement. And it also ensured that Prime Minister Netanyahu did not annex parts of the West Bank or all of it, however politically difficult that might have been for him domestically. And of course, now we have Sudan following on. There could be some other countries over time. And in fact, we saw a former Saudi ambassador to the U.S. Speaking on this issue as well, and indicating some bit of a different view than in the past also. And I'd be interested in Prince Turki's characterization of that perhaps in a moment. I think, again, Prince Turki's assessment of the region.
President, whoever comes along, will have to deal with.
I have so many questions that I want to follow up on, but after I listened to David Petraeus, because you have brought to us several challenging thoughts here, and I'm sure that both Prince Turki and David Petraeus will engage after the Foreign Minister General David Petraeus. To you, General.
As Prince Turki noted, both candidates have very strong relationships in the Middle East. And frankly, if Vice President Biden were the one to return to the White House, I think he would find the landscape in the Middle East is not dramatically different. As Prince Turki laid out, some of these have situations that have continued on, fairly troubling in some cases, with one important exception, and that would, of course, be the Abraham Accords, which I do think are very significant. The recognition of the UAE and Bahrain, of Israel, in the establishment of economic.
Not necessarily in the most positive way, with their attacks on oil tankers and an oil installation in Saudi Arabia. The situation in Iraq is precarious, to say the least. It hasn't yet improved, although they have a new prime minister who's trying to do his best to overcome the challenges that Iraq faces. Syria is still a work in progress. Yemen, of course, is still a civil war going on, and Saudi Arabia is the victim of missiles launched from the Yemen, provided by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Lebanon, as you are probably better situated to tell us about that than me, is also a work in progress. These are just some of the few things that the Middle East is facing, that any has nothing to learn other than to come along with the new developments, if you like, in the last 4 years in our part of the world. Mr. Trump, of course, is as a businessman, he's had contact with our part of the world before, but as a president, of course, he made it his first destination as a president to come to Saudi Arabia, which Saudi people, of course, felt privileged to be distinguished by that visit of the president. Anyway, the future, of course, as I said, Mr. Biden, if he becomes president, he will have to deal with events that have slightly changed since he was vice president. We've seen a more, if you like, active engagement in the area by our Iranian neighbors.
Prince Turki Faisal, here you go.
Thank you very much, Raghadat. It's a pleasure to be back with you, and of course to have such distinguished colleagues on the same panel, as it were, is another distinction for me. I've been, as I'm sure all of you have been, sitting in front of the TV or listening to the radio to find out who's going to be the next president of the United States. Here in the Middle East, of course, the issue is it going to be Trump or Biden, and who is better for us? My personal view is that we will work with either one. And both of them have backgrounds. Mr. Biden, of course, as a senator and vice president, he knows the area very well. He's been to Saudi Arabia many times in his senatorial capacity, and I think even in his vice presidential capacity, if I'm not mistaken. And so
هذه استواء هذا القراد، هذا القراد ينتفخ يشرب كله دم، ترى لو افقعه طلع دم. شفتوا القراد؟